Hi darlings, MimiG here with another tutorial. Today we're going to be sewing along to my new simplicity pattern 1066. There are two styles. View A has no front or back yoke but does have a belt and front pockets. View B has a contrasting front yoke, back yoke, and a contrasting collar. Now for the sake of the sew along, I'm going to be doing a combination of both View A and B. I'm going to walk you through some of the more challenging parts, so I'm going to be doing View B, which has the front and back yokes, but I'm taking the belt and the pockets from View A and adding them to View B. The back of the pattern envelope gives you fabric suggestions, yardage, and all of the notions that you're going to need. But if you're new to sewing or you just need a refresher course, I suggest viewing the Sewing Basics video linked in the description box below, where I talk about all of the basic tools you're going to need, how to understand all of the markings and grain lines that are on your tissue paper, how to pick the right size, how to cut out your fabric, how to interface, and a whole lot of other tips that are going to be very useful. After you're done watching that video, then come back and follow along with me. Let's go over all of the pieces you're going to need. You're going to need pattern piece number 12 and 11, which is our upper and under sleeve, and make sure that you're reading your tissue paper so that you know that you're cutting it out of fabric, and if you have to cut it out of interfacing and lining as well. You're going to be cutting out pattern piece number 20, which is our contrasting yoke. You're going to be cutting out pattern piece number 19. Now I cut out cup B because I'm a cup B, but if you are a cup C, D, or a double D, make sure that you're cutting out the right cup size. You're going to need to cut also pattern piece number 18. You're going to cut out pattern piece number 8 and pattern piece number 9, which is our collar and under collar, which I also cut out in a contrasting fabric. You're going to cut out pattern piece number 7, which is our belt carriers, pattern piece number 17, which is our belt. You're also going to need to cut out pattern piece number 2, which is the back yoke, which I've cut out on a contrasting fabric. Pattern piece number 6, which is our side back. Pattern piece number 21, which is the back of our jacket. For our pocket, you're going to be cutting out pattern piece number 4 and pattern piece number 3. And finally, for our lining, we're going to be cutting out pattern piece number 2, pattern piece number 10. This is our facing. We're going to be cutting out our left and right backs, our side back, our under sleeve lining, and our upper sleeve lining as well. Once you've cut out all of your fabric pieces, make sure that you pin your paper pattern to each piece. So as we're sewing and I say grab piece number 1 or pattern piece number 1, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Also, you may notice that my pattern pieces or my fabric is not interfaced. I'm using a rather heavy fabric, so I'm not going to be interfacing, but if you are using a medium to lightweight fabric, you need to interface all of the pattern pieces that say interfacing. Now that you have everything cut out and interfaced, we can start sewing. Okay, we're going to start by constructing our pocket and then we'll set it aside. So go ahead and grab pattern piece number 3, which is your pocket, and you should have marked all of your dots. So you have all of these dots and markings. You should have this dart here at the bottom as well, all marked onto your fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and remove my tissue. And we're going to fold this in half, and we're going to sew down that stitching line till that first dot that you should have marked. So I'm going to go ahead and pin. And I'm going to pin so that I know where to stop. And we're going to stitch until we reach our dot. Then we're going to move down to that other dot. I'm going to pin through it. put my needle in and continue stitching till the bottom. Back stitch. Now it should look like that, so you should have an opening right here in between those stitching lines. And what we're going to do is we're going to press this to the middle so it's flat. Okay, once it's pressed, it should look like this on the right side and like this on the wrong side. And now we're going to do our dart, so you should have two little snips for your dart legs and then a dot where our dart is going to end. So I'm just going to bring those together and I'm going to pin. And I'm going to pin at the dot just so that I know that that's where I'm stopping. We've created the dart. And you're going to do the same thing to the other dart. Now go ahead and press your darts flat. Okay, with your pocket right side facing you, we're going to turn over where our fold line is. So I just made little dots on the ends to let me know that that's where the fold line is. If you didn't mark it, it's here on your pattern piece. This is your fold line. So I'm going to fold over, and I have serged the edge of my fabric, but if you want to turn over 1/4 of an inch, you can. So I'm going to pin. And I'm going to pin. And now we're going to sew 5/8 of an inch all the way down, and then we're going to continue around the entire pocket. Now on the corner where our facing is, we're going to trim that down to 1/4 inch. Like that. And we're going to turn this over. And you are going to take it over to your ironing table and you're going to press this flat. And then you're going to turn along the stitching line that we've created, and we're going to press this all the way down, all the way across the bottom, and all the way on the other side. When you're done, it will look like this. Once you have it pressed all the way around, go ahead and stitch along the top edge 3/4 of an inch from the folded edge. Alright, now go ahead and grab your pocket flaps, and I have placed my pocket flaps with right sides facing, and I have pinned on the sides and at the bottom. And we're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, starting at the top, and we're going to work our way around, all the way around the bottom and up the other side. Now we're going to go ahead and trim this pretty close to the edge, not too close, but close. About a 1/4 inch, maybe even a little less. I'm going to turn it right side out, and you're going to press it. You should have 2 markings where your buttonholes are going to go, and depending on your sewing machine, you will need to follow your instruction manual on how to make buttonholes for your particular machine. Once it's pressed and you've made your buttonholes, it will look like this. Okay, now go ahead and grab pattern piece number 18 and 19, which is our front and side front. And we're going to place them right sides facing, and we're going to align our notches and pin. And then go down to the next notch and pin. And then at the bottom of both of these, you should have marked a dot. You're going to place those dots together, and you're going to pin. One will be longer than the other. It's supposed to look like that, in case you're wondering. You can pin one more time if you'd like along that middle section. And since this is our bust area, you can see that one has a little more give than the other. So on the front piece, not the side front, we're going to make a couple of snips. Just a couple 1/4 inch snips, so that we can round that off and it can spread. And then go ahead and pin. And then we're going to sew this using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Going to stop at our dot and backstitch. And now go ahead and take it to your ironing table and press your seams open. Alright, once you have sewn your front to your side front and you pressed your seams open, we are going to make a 1-inch slit. So just following this here, we're just going to cut 1 inch, like that. Now go ahead and grab pattern piece number 20, which is our yoke, and you'll see that you have one short end here that has a notch. We're going to place that along the notch on our jacket. Right sides are facing. And we're going to pin, and then we're going to pin in the center, and I want you to go ahead and open this seam about a 1/2 inch, like that, and then go ahead and pivot and pin. The yoke is going to extend. And now we're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to pivot at the center. like that. And then go ahead and cut into your blue fabric or your contrasting fabric. And we're going to remove a little bit of this excess. Don't cut through your stitching. You're just cutting the yoke part. Kind of trim it down. And then you're going to press this so that the seam allowances are facing your yoke, and give it a good press. Once you have it pressed, you're going to do the same exact thing with the remaining pieces. Okay, if you're choosing to add a pocket to the front, then go ahead and make your markings onto your fabric. And we're going to take our pocket and we're going to pin it in place. You should do this on a flat surface. I'm just holding it in my hand so that you guys can see. And you're just going to pin along the edge. Make sure and pin at the corners to keep it all together. It makes it a lot easier. And pin all the way around a couple more times until it's secure. Once you have it pinned in place, you're going to stitch along the edge. Okay, once you're done with that, we're going to go ahead and put our flap in. So you're going to lay your flap right side to right side, right above the top here, and you're going to stitch along the edge. Go ahead and pin it in place. I'm just turning this over, and I'm just going to pin it in place until you put your buttons onto your pocket. I'm going to pin it and then just go ahead and press it down, and then we can move on. Once your pocket and your flap is attached to both your front pieces, go ahead and set them aside, and you're going to grab piece number 21, which is the back of our jacket, and you should have 3 notches, so we're going to pin there first. Right sides are facing, and we're going to stop sewing at that dot. Go ahead and press the seam open. Once you press it open, go ahead and make a little slit into one of the seam allowances so that you can press both your vents to one side. And then grab pattern piece 22, which is our yoke, and with right sides facing, we're going to pin. Align your notches. And we're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then go ahead and press your seam allowance up towards your yoke. Okay, go ahead and grab your side back, and we're going to align our notches. So you should have 2 notches that should align. And go ahead and pin. And then go ahead and pin at the top. And pin along the body. One side will be longer than the other. And starting at the bottom, you're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to attach the other side back the same way, and then you're going to press your seams open. Okay, we're going to create a stay stitching. We're going to create some stay stitching on our neck. So using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're just going to stitch around our neckline until we get to the center. And then starting at the other side, you're going to do the same thing until you reach the center. Now we're going to attach front to back at our shoulders. So go ahead and align your notches. Right sides are facing. And pin. Stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you're going to attach the other shoulder the same way, front to back. Once you've sewn your shoulders together on both sides, go ahead and pin and then sew down your side seams. So I've already done one. I'm going to show you. You're going to pin along your side, matching your notches first. And then you're going to stitch just like we did for the shoulder, all the way down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you're done, you're going to press your side seams and your shoulder seams open. Grab pattern piece number 9, which is our undercollar, and we're going to, with right sides facing, stitch along the center. press the center seam open, and then we're going to attach our undercollar to our jacket. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pin first at the center back of our jacket. So go ahead and take your undercollar and align your notches in the center back and pin. And then we're going to grab this end of our jacket and the end of our collar, undercollar that has the notch, and we're going to align that notch. And you should have a dot, so we're going to pin at that dot. That's where we're going to start stitching. And we're using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, so put your needle in where that dot is. And so you're going to do the same thing to the other side of the collar. Align that notch. Pin at the dot. And once you've attached it at both ends, we're going to sew one continuous seam. So remember, we had a dart, we have a little dart leg, and we had a little end, little dot for the end of our dart. So that's where we're going to start. I'm going to put a pin at that dot. And go ahead and pull and pin. Make sure that seam is open. We're going to press it open. Look for your other dot, the end of our dart, and pin. And now we're going to start sewing at one dart end, and we're going to stitch all the way until we get to the center, and then we're going to start at the other end of the dart and sew until we reach the center. Okay, my needle is right at the end of that dart. And we're sewing with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Turn it over and start at the other dart and work your way back to the center and overlap your stitching. Once you're done with your collar or your undercollar, go ahead and press the seam open. Okay, we're going to go ahead and do our sleeves. So grab one number 12 and one number 11. And with right sides facing, we're going to align our notches. And sew down one end. The end that does not have the vent. You're going to do this for both sleeves, and you're going to press your seam open. Okay, now we are going to do the hem of our sleeve. So on this edge here, this slanted edge, we're going to turn up along that broken line that's on the pattern. You're going to turn it over 2 full inches. And then you're going to pin it. And then you're going to sew this using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And of course, one end here is extending. So we fold it over. Let me show you again. On the slanted edge, you're going to fold over the bottom onto itself. Right sides are now facing each other, and you're turning up a full 2 inches. If you have a seam gauge or a ruler handy, it'd be good to go ahead and measure that and go ahead and pin it, and you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Going to look kind of wonky, but when you turn it to the inside, it creates a mitered corner. Before we do that, go ahead and turn up 1.5 inches. And pin in the middle. And then on the remaining end, also turn up that 1.5 inches and pin. And I want you to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm just going to make a little snip into that corner. And now go ahead and turn this to the right side. Use scissors or a point turner to poke out that little corner. And now take it to your ironing table and make sure that you're pressing up that 1.5 inches all the way across the bottom. Okay, now that it's nice and pressed, we're going to sew the rest of our sleeve together. So you have some notches, so align your notches first. and then you should have a dot. You're going to put your pin through, make sure that you're going to be stopping at that dot. Actually, we're going to start at that dot. Make it easy. Let's put your needle in. We're going to back stitch at that dot and then sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Right here in this center between our notches, we're going to need a little bit of ease, so I'm just going to clip a little bit into the side that is a little tighter. Now you can go ahead and make a little slit into one of the seam allowances so that we can press this seam open. Okay, so now what you should do is grab a needle and thread, and you're just going to catch stitch your hem, and then you're going to fold it over, and you're going to catch stitch this side to this side. Once you have it catch stitched, go ahead and press this one more time so it's nice and flat, and then you can go ahead and sew your buttons on. I'm not going to sew my buttons on right now because I don't have buttons to match my jacket, so I'm just going to keep my pins in place until I find the perfect buttons for this. If you have your buttons handy, go ahead and sew your buttons through all layers. Now you're going to grab your sleeve and make sure you're using the right sleeve for the right armhole. Your notches should match, your dots should all match up. I'm going to, with right sides facing, pin at my notches first, and then I'll turn this over. So I'm going to pin, turn my jacket over. And then I'm going to pin my center dot at the center of my arm sleeve to the shoulder seam. And I'm going to pin there first. Now you can choose to do gathering stitches or easing stitches. I'm going to ease my sleeve in by making small slits. I'm matching my dots. And so clearly here we have some ease. So instead of creating gathering stitches and pulling, I'm just going to go ahead and make small snips into my jacket. And I'm going to ease that sleeve cap in. And then I'll do the same thing over on this side. One will have a lot less ease than the other side. And once you have it pinned, starting at the shoulder seam, you're going to stitch around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you're done, turn your sleeve over. Make sure you don't have any ripples or pinches. I prefer attaching my sleeves this way using the clipping method as opposed to the gathering method because it gives me more control, I think. But you could do it either way. You're going to attach your other sleeve the same way. Okay, once you've sewn your lining together, we're going to attach our lining to our jacket. So right sides facing, we're going to start at the collar. And the collar has 3 notches, so we want to align our 3 notches. 3 notches on one side, 3 notches on the other. We're going to pin at the notches and at the center back. And then we're going to pin our collar. We're going to start at the center. Using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Pivot, and you're going to stop where your existing stitching is. So as soon as you see stitching, that's where you're going to stop. And now I want you to put the remaining seam allowance up, and you're going to put your needle right where your existing stitching is. Where you see stitching, that's where you're going to put your needle in. Continue down the front. Make sure you align your notches. We're going to sew the bottom, making sure to stop right at the folded edge. Now you're going to go back to the center of the collar and you're going to do the same thing working the other direction. Now before we do any trimming, we are going to finish our vent. So what I want you to do is I want you to pin the right side of our vent to the right side of the vent lining. And we're going to sew along the short end first. And then I'll move the rest of it to the side. And then pivot down. We're going to stop about 2 inches before we get to the bottom here. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to sew the side first and then the shorter edge. And we're going to stop 2 inches short of the bottom edge. And then sew along the top edge. Now we're going to finish off the rest of our hem. So I'm going to align all of my seams and I'm going to pin. We're going to sew using 1/2 inch seam allowances. once you've turned your jacket inside out and you've given it a decent press, I always suggest taking it to the dry cleaners and having them press it, because they do a much better job than you'll be able to do at home with a regular iron. That's what I intend on doing. All that's left for you to do is to do any hand sewing, do your buttonholes, and attach your buttons, and you are all done. I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. Until next time, peace.